Welcome to Around the Blockchain. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Awesome. Emma, welcome to Around the Blockchain. If you can just introduce yourself for the viewers for me.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So my name's Emma Weston, and I'm the CEO and a co-founder at AgriDigital, and it's great to be here.
No, awesome. Thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. Look, how did you get into the blockchain space?
So AgriDigital with jumping into, I guess, AgriDigital first, because that's where it started. But AgriDigital is a company that's focused on digitizing the grain supply chain. And I'm a farmer. My two co-founders are farmers. We were particularly passionate about problems around supply chain, such as delays in payment, transactional latency, counterparty risk. These are things that are endemic to supply chain. And so that was really where the interest in blockchain started, because back in 2015, when we started AgriDigital, I was looking at, I guess I was like all founders, is there a silver bullet here that could help me solve all of these problems at once? And, blockchain's definitely not that silver bullet, but it did start us on a path that, helped us build out a really comprehensive tool. And, we now use blockchain in the finance part of the business.
That's awesome. And so what is your role now with AgriDigital? What do you sort of do?
I'm still the CEO there. So still definitely involved with AgriDigital. It's 5 years now. And really the main focus of my role is heading up strategy, investor relations. We're venture backed as well as a family office. And so, that's an important part of what I do, building the team out and also leading global growth. We've just expanded into North America, with plans to eventually move into South America and Europe as well.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty big moves. Obviously, jumping from Australia over to the US and South America as well is like obviously quite a lengthy process, I could imagine. Can you talk to me about that? How did that all sort of come about?
So we always knew when we started AgriDigital that the solution that we were building and solving problems like, counterparty risk, delays in payment, making sure that farmers get paid for what they deliver when they deliver, none of those problems are Australian problems. They're global problems, right? So we always knew that we were building a global solution, and the market in North America, we're focused on the grain market, and the grain market in North America is about 12 and a half times the size of the Australian market. So it's a natural second market for us. But it hasn't been easy, obviously, with COVID. Luckily enough, pre-COVID, we'd spent a lot of time in the US. I was effectively based in the US, building out our go-to-market strategy, making sure we were well networked, that we could launch with core group of early adopters. And we now have a team of 3 on the ground, soon to be 5. And the funniest thing is I've only ever met in person one of those people. So, it just goes that you can do it even with COVID, right? You can build teams, you can expand products, you can launch into new markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing that COVID's really sort of, taught a lot of people is you don't need to meet people face to face. Obviously, like most of my podcast guests, I've never met face to face, to be honest with you. But yeah, obviously Zoom and stuff like that sort of plays a big part in, helping you sort of connect with people halfway across the world. After you guys decided to move into, North America and South America, and you guys are sort of starting to put some footholds there now as well. Have there been many challenges, taking the product, a successful product that you have here domestically in Australia, and taking it to that international stage?
Yeah, look, it's absolutely, there is a challenge in translating what you've built out in one country, in one market to another market. And that's why, really deep interaction with that market, all of the research that we did prior to launch, lots of networking, lots of attending trade shows, lots of kind of, just feet on the ground, getting around the country, listening to people, making sure that we understood we had product market fit. All of that was really important. And we haven't launched in South America and won't probably for like 2 years, but already we're starting to think about how we're going to enter that market. What is similar about that market to North America and Australia? What's different? And that's a lot of what kind of governs our approach. I guess the second thing is having a great team on the ground. We have a fantastic country lead in Katrina Stanislav in the US. And so, she is effectively a blend of, myself in terms of having a CEO or a senior manager skill set, but also with real entrepreneurial flair herself. So, you know, she's got that kind of intrepid founder spirit that is fantastic for a startup launching into a new market.
Yeah, absolutely. Those people are obviously key to have within your business, especially in the early days of launching something. It can be quite difficult. Look, how does AgriDigital work exactly? I guess from the the blockchain sort of side of things, and then maybe if you can just sort of talk a little bit about the sort of supply chain process that farmers and stuff go through now as well, and sort of talk about how AgriDigital, I guess, makes that better for them.
Yeah, sure. And I should, I don't know if it's an apology to some of the listeners and followers of Around the Blockchain, but at AgriDigital, we are real blockchain pragmatists. So we're definitely not purists. We've seen a lot with blockchain development over the past 5 years. And in order to actually bring it into our tech stack and to really make use of it, I think we have to be very pragmatic still at this very early stage, because we are combining a nascent technology with, an existing tech stack, as well as with, physical goods, right? And a long and old industry in agriculture. So taking a step back, agriculture is the least digitized industry in the world by a really long way. And incidentally, it's also the world's largest employer. So it employs 40% of the world's working population, which makes it just really fertile ground when we're looking at how we're going to improve processes, because most of the processes across the agri supply chain are manual. And so, there are literally millions and millions and millions of paper-based transactions that are occurring on a daily basis. And to give you a bit of an example, one of our early adopter customers in the US showed us at the very start, before he took on the AgriDigital product Waypath, which is our application for farmers. He used to get 25,000 pieces of paper each year, which just represented deliveries of grain by he, as a farmer, into the supply chain. And each of those 25,000 pieces of paper had to be reconciled. They had to be entered into, different transactional systems. They had to be marked with a checkbox, for this is being paid. And all of those records also had to be kept and reproduced if needed for audit and reporting purposes. So he literally had like a 10-foot or 12-foot boardroom table and was like, if you can get rid of this table, you've done me a great service. So, at its most basic level, we are looking at replacing paper and pen, I guess, with a digital inventory management system. And that's what AgriDigital is. What we're really doing is digitizing the grain supply chain so that we create a digital version of the physical inventory and then track and trace its movement through the supply chain, providing all of the operational transactional capability around buying and selling that grain. So contracts, managing deliveries and receivables of that grain, so physical movement of the grain, inventory management in terms of quality and quantity management so that it can be sold to specification into the supply chain. And of course, really important data around how that grain was produced, how it was stored, how it was moved, and we push that into the supply chain. So we do that off a universal data layer. So one single data layer that aggregates all of that for all participants in the supply chain and then leverages that data up to the particular participant as and when they need it. And that goes through a different suite of products. This gives us really unparalleled view of the commodity at any point in time, because of course it's all real time. And increasingly, we're not just doing that through replacing paper and pen with a farmer, typing in data into an application. Increasingly, that's through integrations with weigh bridges and quality testing instrumentation and, the machinery, if you like, and the instrumentation of the supply chain. So basically, that's what we do. And, there's some of the challenges around the supply chain that we're looking to solve for. One of the big reasons we do that is that apart from technology itself being a barrier to small to medium enterprise growing and participating in the supply chain, the second big barrier is accessing capital. And this is where we really see huge potential for blockchain. I mean, it's obvious that there is a huge amount of excitement around traceability in the supply chain. But to be honest, the main focus for us is ways in which we can bring alternative sources of capital to farmers and buyers of commodities, traders of commodities and others to be able to help them grow their business. So this is effectively either replacing or adding to bank capital and been able to do that on alternate rails. And that's where we see, blockchain being fantastic. So in our business, we use blockchain currently in two main ways. And it's not across the whole business. I want to be really upfront and honest with everyone about that. We don't, although we have 8,000 active users, by far the majority of them are not using any form of blockchain at all in their transactions at this point in time. So a lot of it is still quite early stage. But the way that we use blockchain is in delivering our supply chain finance products to our customers. So that has been able to effectively create a digital asset version of the physical asset, and then being able to put that digital asset on chain. So it's effectively, tokenization of a physical asset, and being able to attach that to a finance contract. And so the reason that that's important is, number one, we want to be able to prove who owns that grain at any point in time. That's crucial to being able to de-risk the financing. The second area is a really kind of a new one. I'm giving you a bit of a exclusive on this, actually, Ryan. So recently, we, as AgriDigital, just integrated with Giora, which is a blockchain company that utilized some technology that we originally developed, but then has now taken it into a whole new direction for a much broader set of uses. And they provide really effective API-driven access to blockchain as a service, as an infrastructure provider, in essence. And so we've incorporated Giora into our Waypath for Farmers product, so that now any farmer who is managing their grain using Waypath, which once again is our farmer app from AgriDigital, is able to create and manage their inventory and push that onto the blockchain, so that they can attach data to that particular digital asset, which they can then push further down the supply chain. So this is basically putting traceability in the hands of farmers, but also hopefully enabling them to access premium paying markets for their grain that they may not be able to access at this point in time. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but that's kind of the farmer journey, what we do as a company, and the way that we use blockchain.
No need to apologize. That was awesome. Look, do you think, you mentioned that the agricultural industry is probably the least digitized industry in the world. Do you sort of see blockchain as just being a natural progression into, not just making agriculture itself, I guess, more streamlined, but like, I guess, in terms of the entire ecosystem, like through the supply chain sort of side of things, do you sort of see blockchain technology, making everything, I guess, more streamlined and easier for people to sort of use?
So I guess at like a macro level, when we have a look at supply chain, it's effectively one of the most distributed industries, in the world. So, whether that's agriculture or its broader supply chain. And I think that's why there's been an immediate interest in supply chain as a use case for blockchain. Specifically, when we then focus in on agriculture as an industry, there's two main opportunities that I see. So one is in first world or developed world agricultural applications, where we have farmers, adopting a variety of different digital technologies. Like there's a huge suite of ag tech tools that are now out there. And, blockchain really provides a means to actually start tying all of these different data sets together in a way that is meaningful for supply chain users. So I think that's going to be one of the really good use cases for blockchain in the developed world, as well as on the finance side. If we then think about, third world countries and developing nations, developing world nations, there's actually a massive opportunity to leapfrog straight into an infrastructure play that is completely digital from the outset. And so I think that's where blockchain is going to have enormous impact, in the developing world. So in Africa, in India, in parts of Asia, where there isn't a lot of developed infrastructure, whether it's physical or technically based. And blockchain can really come in and provide a suite of services and effectively operate as the internet of the supply chain, if you like, in those countries.
Do you see AgriDigital going into those countries at some stage?
Yeah, look, I'd love to think so. When I say we do grain and focusing on grain, that includes rice, it includes all types of grains. So it's not just wheat and barley and feed grains, it's every type of grain. And if you think about grain is actually used for food, absolutely. It's used for feed, so for feeding animals, and it's also used for fuel. We'd like to think that over time we can even move beyond grain, and we've already started that with some early stage work in cotton, which then brings us into the fibre industries as well. So yeah, we'd definitely love to think that we can continue growing in that way. To begin with, our focus to begin with is on those nations that have large exporting potential. So they have, buoyant domestic markets, but also have a large export market, because that creates a lot of complexity and volume in the trade. And that's where we think we can have the highest impact to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what have sort of some of the challenges been with AgriDigital? Obviously here domestically first, and then I guess maybe moving on into you guys expanding into North America as well.
Look, I think to begin with, so my co-founders and I have been in the Australian grain supply chain for a really long time. So we did have the benefit of, hopefully what was, perceived and is in fact a really good reputation in the market. We'd like to think we're good people that have been around and know what we're doing. So that certainly helped in terms of getting AgriDigital off the ground. But, I can't say that there weren't skeptics out there. There were a lot of skeptics about, the desire that we had and the vision that we had to digitize the supply chain all the way from farmer to consumer, because all of the previous technology had been focused just on one participant and one part of the supply chain. So, we were really the first out there saying, no, this whole thing should be connected, and we're going to build out a platform to do that. Now, we're obviously only partway through that journey, and, it doesn't come without technical challenges and market entry challenges and product challenges. There does seem to be challenges every day. That's really what my job is, I suppose, to try and help the team get through those. I think if I picked a couple out, in the early days from a blockchain perspective, given, that's the focus for today, we really did think that this should be an industry good. No one should own blockchain. No one should own, key applications of blockchain in some ways, and so we tried to put a consortium together in the industry, and it was just a failure, complete failure. We just could not get anyone to, really commit beyond wanting to be part of a PR headline and really wanting to do something real. So we've definitely had challenges ourselves and working with our customers to bring blockchain-based technologies and solutions into the production environment. So getting it out of pilots, getting it out of experimentation and into production. I think the other challenge for us in terms of using blockchain and really being able to leverage it to its fullest is the lack of a valid digital trading currency that supports our use case being, grain as a commodity industry. So it's just taken a really long time for central banks and others to get on board with the concept of a digital currency, to understand that's not the same as EFTPOS, essentially. It's not the same as e-money. It's about having, money that is able to be exchanged in real time for valuable goods, that is able to be programmed and to form an input into a smart contract. And I think that kind of gap in understanding, really set the industry back to a certain extent. So I think we're still working through that. And I guess then, thinking about growing into North America, the biggest challenge there, I think, is really the size of the market. So coming from Australia, we do some things fantastically well in Australia, but we're not always good about thinking big, thinking global, and really being able to put our money where our mouth is and kind of get out there and mix it with the big boys, so to speak. And there's a lot of big boys in the grains industry, and a lot of them are based in the US. And so, really having the fire in our bellies and continuing to have the fire in our bellies. I mean, we have the passion, but sometimes, you wake up in the morning, you think this is pretty hard. Can I go on? How long can I go on for? But then something happens and, it's all worthwhile. So I definitely think that attacking large, complex markets is a hard one, and it's a hard one even if you can be there. It's obviously doubly difficult at the moment, being not stuck in Australia, because I'm very happy to be in Australia, but not being able to kind of get into market is a is a difficulty, but it's something that's been shared with everybody. That's obviously not something we're experiencing alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a unique problem to one specific industry. It's obviously, worldwide, unfortunately. So
Right.
you seem to have been doing pretty good anyway throughout the whole COVID sort of ordeal, which is a good sign. So what I was going to ask next was, do you have any sort of real world examples of, farmers using your technology and, having some sort of positive outcomes from that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, focusing in on the farmer use case, and we have farmers as customers, we have traders, grain buyers, processors, dairies, feedlots, oil crushers, mills, all sorts of different customers, storage operators as well, because we are focused on that whole of supply chain use case. I think, one of the key successes, and I'm going to start with a deeper one, and then maybe move to something that's a little bit lighter. But the first sort of deep success was, actually not so much a farmer. It was a trader storage operator, using the AgriDigital platform and really being able to redesign their business for hyper efficiency off the back of a technology that is actually a very, very small part of their budget, when it comes down to it, right? We're talking about, $20,000, $30,000 a year technology, but being able to get hyper efficiency in the form of, for them, it was truck turnaround time. So having trucks, being able to pass through a weighbridge, not even twice as quickly. We're talking 5-10 times as quickly, as previously, because they've got a great technology that, they're able to use to manage their operation. And then, the customer satisfaction that gives their customers has immediate impact, for us, right? Because a lot of those customers, realize that particular entity is using AgriDigital. It's not just then the turnaround times, but actually, entering in contracts of sale. That particular customer, it used to take them about 30 minutes to do one contract for the sale of grain. And they would literally do thousands of those each year. And that 30 minutes went down to 90 seconds using AgriDigital. So, it's a function and that's not just a function of blockchain, it's a function of good design. It's a function of, really understanding the industry and being able to combine deep domain expertise, with an understanding of how to apply technology in that industry. So I think that's where we're having the biggest impact initially, is a lot around efficiency, cost savings, starting to remove transactional latencies. So another example would be a farmer delivering into a silo operator. Once upon a time, might have had to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get confirmation that grain had actually been delivered. Now that might be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of grain asset that they just don't even know where it actually is. And that's because everything was paper-based, paper tickets. They'd get the truckie to deliver into the silo. The truckie would get the paper ticket. He would then go on to another job and maybe wouldn't get to the end. At the end of the month, he might send that ticket back to the farmer, and finally they could complete the loop. Now all of that is obviously being done in real time. So, the farmer's much more secure in terms of their asset. So they're the kind of, the savings and the value that's been, that we're hearing from customers that really matters to them. And then just kind of a lighter example is, but it was still really pleasing to me that a few years ago, we received a call from, and I don't want to, I probably shouldn't say her age, but she did tell me her age. And she was in her 80s and may even been a little bit older, actually. But an older lady who said to me, "I'm just rang to tell you that I've just transferred my grain in warehouse, and it was as easy as Facebook." So, we do think that we need to be a technology for everyone, right? And so often novel technologies are really only able to be picked up easily by digital natives, by millennials. But the reality is the average farmer age is in its 60s around the world. And we do hope that's changing, and farming is going to be an occupation that young people want to do as well. But that means that, we need to be accessible as a technology for every age group.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that as well. My dad's 72, and he knows how to, internet bank. He knows how to do a little bit of stuff with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's fantastic.
yeah, it is, right? Like I think it's naive to think that, you know, the older generation can't learn these sorts of things. So it's cool to hear a
Well,
story like that.
and naive to think they don't want to either, right? Like, you know, most people want to optimize the value of their core assets. And so if there's some way that they can do that, you know, they're going to want to go to it. But if we can make it easier as technology companies, as product providers, you know, that's really the job. It's not just to solve the problem, but it's to solve the problem well. And, you know, not to cause too many frustrations along the way. And I think that's, you know, that was one of the issues with blockchain as a technology in the early days, right? It was frustrating, well, it still is frustrating for many people. You know, there's so much friction in being able to, you know, actually get utility and value from the technology. And so, you know, that was something that we took to heart in the early days and realized that, you know, blockchain's one thing, but then you've got to have an application layer, you know, that sits on top that is super simple. And to a certain extent, you know, our customers shouldn't even necessarily know that blockchain's involved in the back end, right? You know, they probably just want to turn the tap on and for the water to come out the pipe. They don't want to know how the pipes were built.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a really good example of, you know, something like you've just said then. People use their mobile phones every day, right? They don't want to know how it works. It's obviously relatively complicated. They just want to know that it works and that it's easy to sort of use. So I think
Yeah,
that's where blockchain and you know, crypto and stuff like that is starting to obviously go.
I think it needs to. And that's why I said, you know, as a pragmatist, yeah, I want to be able to use something and get the value from it. You know, back in the day, email, right? But I still probably couldn't explain to you really how email works even now. So, you know, the fact that it does and I get the benefit that I need, you know, I need from it is really what counts. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And, you know, that's where I think blockchain and also the crypto economy and the crypto ecosystem, not that it's done itself a disservice because it's just part of a development, you know, and of the development phase. But to begin with, it was a little kind of niche, and almost there were people within the industry that didn't want to break out of that niche. And yet the success of the technology is going to be the broadest adoption and utility of that technology over time.
Absolutely. Look, speaking of, do you guys have plans to branch out past the grain sort of supply chain industry into other agricultural sort of supply chain industries as well?
Yeah, we do. The grains industry, I guess luckily for us, it's $1 trillion industry, Aussie, each year in terms of production. So it's a very, very big industry, and plenty of you know, addressable market for us in there. But as I said, we are really interested in you know, other commodities that exhibit similar pain points to the grains industry. That we think that we're well placed to solve. And so, you know, they do include commodities like cotton, also sugar, we're very interested in, and, you know, potentially coffee, cocoa, you know, and so probably what you'll notice from that is I haven't said livestock, and I haven't said anything that's horticultural. Now, once we get cold storage involved, the supply chain changes a bit, and you know, that would mean we would have to adapt certain components of our knowledge set and also our technology to accommodate that. I think the most likely area for us to participate, particularly in the livestock industry, will be around finance. It's a big growth engine for us, and financing livestock is actually very similar to financing grain as to financing cotton or as to you know, financing coffee. So, you know, that's where we can probably see we'll have the biggest impact in a cross commodity, and from a cross commodity perspective.
Yeah, awesome. What are the sort of challenges around, you know, financing something like this? You've mentioned that a couple of times now that, you know, farmers sort of struggle with financing certain parts of their operation. What are the main sort of issues there for them? And then I guess, how are you looking to try and help solve that?
So thinking from a farmer's perspective again, you know, one of the biggest challenges for the farmer is that they're sitting on this asset that they've taken a whole year to produce, you know, in the instance of grain and for many annual crops, you know, which is of high value, but they can't unlock the value of that asset. And so if they have cash flow requirements, which they usually do, they have no other choice really other than to go and sell that commodity in order to access cash for their cash flow needs. And unfortunately, those decisions are not always made at the optimal pricing time for that commodity because, the price is very volatile and fluctuates throughout the year. So, what we'd like to be able to see is that a farmer can separate the decision of, I have cash flow requirement and I need to make a decision around my cash flow needs from a marketing decision or a pricing decision with that commodity. And, one way to do that is by financing the commodity on a commodity-backed basis. So instead of looking at the credit history of a farmer, we're just actually looking at the commodity, what is it worth, how much of it is there, what's the quality, where is it located, how is it priced, and then being able to finance the commodity itself. So, that makes it a lot quicker. We've obviously got the technology, which gives us, a transparent view of that commodity in the supply chain and enables us to bring the finance to market, at a very reasonable rate to the farmer.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds like very interesting, to be honest with you.
I think so. It's actually, not that you can't have a favorite child, right? So I can't have a favorite part of the business. That wouldn't go down well. But I find that the finance opportunity and the way in which we're now able to combine technology and finance to deliver, really important solutions to such a broad market is just fascinating to me. And, I have a financial services background from a grain perspective, back in the day. But everything was so manual, it was so difficult. And although some of the products and solutions existed, they weren't accessed by farmers because they were just too difficult to implement. And so I guess that goes back to the usability, aspects of implementing technology and great products that we were talking to earlier, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Does that sort of look like a farmer, tokenizing their particular commodity, like you've just sort of said? Is that sort of how you would implement that?
Yeah, so on the finance side, we have a special purpose vehicle that holds the title to the physical grain on its balance sheet. And so to protect that interest of the special purpose vehicle as the financier, so we'll just call that AgriDigital going forward as the financier, we want to have as much security around that title as possible. So having a way for us or the farmer to tokenize that grain and then to be able to attribute the title to the title holder in a way that cannot be tampered with, that is incontrovertible, and that is a permanent record is crucially important to the development of finance into areas where there's been no finance, because there's no credit history, there's no history of default. It's very difficult to therefore be able to price the risk. We want to price the risk in the same way as if a farmer was just going and getting a loan from the bank, but make it 100 times quicker and easier.
Yeah, awesome. Look, what do you guys have planned for the rest of 2021? And then I guess obviously once we get through this COVID sort of mess, what else do you sort of have planned beyond that as well?
Well, if you can crystal ball as to when that latter one's going to be, let me know. I'm kind of just starting to say it's the new normal now, I think, from this COVID mess. But in terms of the rest of this year, look, there's a couple of cool things that, will be coming up. And I don't think I'm going to be jumping the gun too much to announce that. So, one is that integration with Giora that will be announced publicly shortly. And that will put farmers in a position where they can actually push data from their farm with that grain asset into the supply chain, creating true traceability back to the paddock level and using Waypath to do that. So, we're really, really excited about that because we've been talking about it for a while and now it's finally here. The second area, two areas that I'm really excited about are some pilots that we're doing in the US, actually. One is called Seed to Feed. So it's looking at sustainable soybean production and tracking and tracing that soybean into the livestock industry. And the second one is on low carbon grain. So being able to produce grain with carbon sequestration impact, and once again, to be able to track not only the grain, but the sustainability data or the carbon sequestration data into the supply chain as well. And, really a third limb of our strategy is building sustainable supply chains. And so, I'm pretty excited that we're getting to finally make that happen. I think for next year, in terms of, let's just assume that enough people are vaccinated, whatever that number may be, and, bubbles start to open up and there is travel, irrespective of whether there is travel or not, we will continue to be growing out our presence across the US. But I think if there is the ability to travel, this will accelerate our capability to deliver finance into the US market. And, that'll be a really big milestone for us next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it sounds like you guys have a pretty busy, rest of the year ahead, and then obviously a couple of years into the future as well. Emma, look, it's been fantastic having you on. Do you have any closing thoughts for the viewers, and maybe just some information to the viewers as well, where they can sort of find a bit more about AgriDigital and yourself?
Well, look, I just want to say thanks for having been on the podcast. I really relish the opportunity. And so if there's anyone who's been listening who, is also equally passionate about the agricultural part of the supply chain and wants to help us, join that up with the food part of the supply chain, I'd love to hear from you. So that's my ask. We will be hiring in the back half of this year. So that would be fantastic. I think also, just as a closing comment, we really applaud companies that have built businesses around blockchain, but what we really want to see is all businesses being able to avail themselves of this technology. And so anything that we can all be doing as an industry to kind of start removing friction and making blockchain, not a word to be avoided, but just a word that is completely normalized, within the tech stack, I think is fantastic. So I think that's just on all of us in the community if we can do that. If anybody's interested, then, they can reach out to me via the AgriDigital websites. That's www.agridigital.io, or just directly to me on Twitter is probably the main way that you can catch me. And I'm at Emma M. Weston on Twitter.
Awesome, Emma. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you jumping on.
Okay, thanks so much. See everyone.